Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special fantasy edition of Keeping Score, where we're going to be talking about all things fantasy football. Today, in this particular show, I'm going to be talking about the defenders that you should be cramming in last minute into your fantasy teams to give you the best possible chance of getting a very good start to the fantasy season. But as much as I will be trying to give you a lot of logic and a lot of statistics, the basic caveat that I'm going to attach to any prediction that I make today is that there is no logic in fantasy football often. And a lot of the times you've got your plans laid out, but then an injury, a suspension, or a crazy Pep Guardiola decision throws everything you've planned out the window. So, having put that caveat out there, let's get right into it and start discussing what defenders you should be picking. And we're going to be starting with the 6.5 and the 7.0 range of defenders, the premium defenders, wherein the general rule that people tend to apply is that you're going to have at most one defender in this range. Well, I'm going to ask you to buck the trend here and go for two. And we're going to be discussing four players that I think are good, viable options for you to take from the start. The first one is Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think this guy is the dead cert pick that everybody should have in his team. And there's a reason for that. So he had 185 points last season. That's not a lot. He had one goal, he had 13 assists, he had 16 clean sheets, he had a massive 25 bonus points. But he played a lot less minutes than everybody else on the list in terms of the 6.5 to 7 range premium defenders. In fact, he's averaging 7.1 points per game. And he gives you a value of 38.5 points per million. That's better than most players across the league. And I'm talking Salah, Sterling, Harry Kane, all the big guns. So if you want someone in your team that gives you value for buck and gives you a great amount of points, Trent Arnold is your guy. He could be the highest scoring fantasy points player. And I project that he's probably going to have around 220, 230 points easy this season because he's going to get better. And he's a goal and assist machine and he's a set piece taker. So Trent Arnold is the guy that you put in your team, you set and you forget because you're going to rely on Liverpool to get a lot of clean sheets as well. Which again is where his partner Robertson sort of comes in as well. Now, ordinarily, you would not want to double up on two defenders from the same team. But Arnold and Robbo as a pairing at the back end of last season was one of the most popular picks in terms of strategies for a lot of fantasy Premier League managers. And the stats back it up. 213 points, 12 assists, 21 clean sheets, 29 bonus points, 6.3 average points per game, 34.2 points per million. This guy is, again, excellent and amazing value. And my argument for you to put both of these guys in your team is the fact that if you go into midfield and if you go into attack, if you have 7.2 points to spend, you are not going to get any midfielder or striker who can give you close to that amount of points. So for that reason alone, I would say cut out on the budget on one of your midfielders if you have to, but get both of these Liverpool guys in your team. If you want to spend a little less but get a similar range of points, you can look at Van Dijk, who had 208 points last season, has 5.8 points per game to offer you. So he's good value as well. Not as good as Arnold, not as good as Robertson, but pretty close, someone to look at. Laporte is a little further down. He's on 177 points. He averages 5.5 points per game. He doesn't score or assist as many, but City keep a lot of clean sheets. And he kept a lot of bonus points at the back end of last season because he was very instrumental in their clean sheets. So he's a guy that you should be looking at. But I would ideally recommend, particularly with the fixtures that Liverpool have got in their first 10 matches, even over the course of the 38-game season, to set and forget Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson, because even when they don't give you a clean sheet, there's a very good chance they give you a goal or an assist. So that's the premium range defenders. By this point, if you followed my instructions, 14.0 are already gone from your bag. We move on to the 6.0 range, and this is where you go to the second tier of premium defenders. And here, in my opinion, there's only really two good options for you. First, you've got Lucas Digne. He's got 158 points. The back end of last season, Everton started keeping a lot of clean sheets. So you're hoping if that carries forward into this season, they have lost Kurt Zouma, but they're in the market for a defender. So if they're able to get a good one, Marco Silva seems to have figured out his defensive shape and system. But again, they've lost Idrissa Gueye, so that's something to look at. But he averaged 5 points a game. He averages 31.7 points per million based on his points projection. If Everton deliver on their defensive value, he's a guy with, again, goals and assists and set pieces. So someone to look at in a 6.0 range. Maybe not going to get you as much as a Liverpool pairing, but if he plays as well as he did at the back end of last season, he's a guy to look at. The other guy is a bit of a surprise pick. It's Kyle Walker. And the reason that Kyle Walker is being put in this list is because despite the fact that he's not really gotten as many goals and assists as someone with his attacking potential should, he's someone you'll find consistently in the City lineup, particularly if they're not able to sign Cancelo on deadline day. So if the status quo remains, he's a shoo-in to play. He gets a lot of clean sheets, he gets decent bonus points, and he's averaging 5.1 points per game, which is good value for a 6.0 defender. Someone to think about, but I would definitely take the risk on Dean over Walker if I had the chance. And let's move on to the 5.5 range, and this is where Matt Ritchie of Newcastle is going to be my premium go-to guy pick. And the reason for that is that Matt Ritchie is a defender who is playing as basically a number 10 or an advanced winger in Steve Bruce's new Newcastle setup. He's someone they rely on a lot, and he had 8 assists last season. He had 10 clean sheets, where midfielders don't really get as many clean sheet points as the defenders do. If you translate that to defender points, that's crazy. He had 2 goals. He could build upon that this season. He could even build upon his assists theoretically because he has better teammates around him. So with that, you're looking at a guy who last season averaged 3.6 points per game, but this season could have a heck of a lot more. So someone to think about and gamble on this season. The next guy that I'm going to be giving to you is another slightly outside of the box pick, Seamus Coleman. He only had 125 points last season, but Seamus Coleman is a great pick because he had those 125 points in very little playtime that he had, and he's another guy that could be heavily involved, and he was heavily involved in Everton's late run of clean sheets. So if Everton are solid at the back, he's someone that can get you a lot of bonus points. He averages 4.7 points per game. He has a 32.5 points per million rate, which for a defender at 5.5 in Seamus Coleman, if with the caveat he can stay fit, is a great pick. The last one is a very popular pick, and that's Van Bissaka, but I would take him with a pinch of salt for 2 reasons. Last season, he was right up there. He was fantastic. One of the biggest reasons for that was his price tag. He started out with a 4.0 price tag, and for that kind of price, the kind of points that he was giving was fantastic. This year, he's on 5.5. So for 5.5, the defender who gets you 110 points a season may not be that big of a priority pick for you. He might improve upon it, you might think, because now he's partnering Maguire, De Gea, Lindelof, as well as Shaw and the general United defense. But Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has not necessarily had the most solid defensive record so far, so you're going to have to watch out on that. I'm not sure how much he can improve upon his assist rate from last season. He had 8. He might improve a bit upon it, but I highly doubt he'll improve upon the amount of bonus points he was getting, given the kind of quality players that he now has to compete with as compared to Crystal Palace. So someone to watch out for, definitely. Let's move on to the 5.0 range now. And this is where you're looking at teams primarily from the perspective of a decent amount of points, not crazy points, but primarily trying to maximize the points that you can get out of the first 10 fixtures based on the kind of the fixtures that the teams have. So you've got Duffy here. He has 115 points, 5 goals, 2 assists, clean sheets. He's right up there from amongst the budget defenders. He's the most high goal scoring one, but the clean sheets when it comes to Brighton is a bit of a problem. It might be even more of a problem this season, but he averages 3.5 points a game. I think he's a decent shout, someone to look at, especially considering the easy kind of fixtures that Brighton have. But there's also the caveat there, it's Brighton, so a fixture that's necessarily easy in the fantasy Premier League terms may not be as easy for Brighton, considering how everybody seems to have good attacking talent around them. A slightly safer pick perhaps is Nathan Ake, who had 120 points, again has a fantastic first 10 fixtures, 4 goals, 1 assist, 10 clean sheets, 8 bonus points, 3.3 points a game. That's a really good record for a 5.0 range defender. Someone to look at, particularly for the first 10 games, if not for the long run. The third pick is a slightly out-of-the-box pick and one that could be potentially brilliant, but also could be a very risky one, and that's Kurt Zouma. In terms of points, Kurt Zouma had 112 last season, but he didn't play a lot at the start of the season. He has 2 goals, 2 assists, 10 clean sheets, 12 bonus points, But the crazy thing is that if you account for the amount of games that he played, he averages 4.1 points per game, which is hell for leather better than anyone you're going to get in the 5.2 or 4.5 point range. In fact, even in the 5.5 range, there's no one really that matches the amount of points per game average that someone like Zuma can give you. And now he's in this Chelsea team. He's surrounded by really good defenders around him. In theory, you would think he would improve upon his points because he's a shoe-in for Frank Lampard's side, with Christensen and Rudiger likely to fight it out, especially if David Luiz leaves for the other spot. But the downside to this is that whilst at the end of the season Marco Silva got a lot of clean sheets and that inflated the points of every Everton defender, with this Chelsea side there's a bit of a question mark with regards to the defence, because Frank Lampard's teams have generally looked porous, and in the pre-season Chelsea particularly have conceded a lot of goals. In fact, against Leipzig they conceded 26 shots in a single match. So until they sort that out, there is that question mark. But if Chelsea get their act together in defence, Kurt Zouma is the pick of the bunch in terms of the Chelsea defenders. So he's someone to look at 5.0, definitely. A way in into one of the top 6 sides, someone to recommend. If you're looking at someone more reliable in terms of teams, but maybe not as reliable in terms of points, Kyle Walker-Peters is another guy you can look at in that price range. Let's bring it down to the 4.5s, because you're gonna, especially if you go for the Robbo Alexander-Arnold combination that I've suggested in the first place, you're gonna want a couple of 4.5 guys in your team. One of the standout guys in terms of fixtures and reasonable points is Smith from Bournemouth. He had 70 points last season, but he had crucially 8 clean sheets, and he got injured a lot, so his points per game ratio is actually pretty decent for a 4.5 defender. It's 3.2 points per game, and you could use that because you're looking at a defender that over the course of 10 games can give you a good healthy 30 points from ideally your like 4th or 5th defender spot. So that's a good guy to consider. Lewis Dunk, again, for his fixtures, he's the guy who always partners Duffy. He's slightly cheaper than Duffy, doesn't score as many goals and therefore not as many points. But if you're looking to save that extra 0.5 here, he's a good option for you to have. He averages 2.7 points a game. And similarly, Issa Diop of West Ham also offers you 2.7 points per game. And given that West Ham are a good team, they have decent fixtures, he's someone to look at. But Manuel Pellegrini's side have struggled a bit defensively, so we're not really sure how dependable they'll be for clean sheets. However, at 4.5, these are your 3 best picks that you can look at in terms of fixtures and in terms of their ability to get you some good points early on. Which brings us, lastly, finally, to the enablers, the 4.0s. And there's a few of them this season that have been picked. And if you go into the Fantasy Premier League's most picked players, you have a few picks that don't really make sense because there's no chance for them to play, right? But there are, in my opinion, 2 players in the 4.0 range that could make it into the side. But again, a big asterisk here because both of them might not end up making it. One of them is Martin Kelly from Crystal Palace. He's the guy who's been playing a lot in preseason because Wan-Bissaka was sold and they haven't been able to get anyone in. But at the same time, they have been trying very hard to get someone in, and the deadline still has a few hours to go. So if somebody comes in at the deadline, if not in the next game, within 3, 4, 5 games, especially if it's someone good, you could see Kelly being replaced from the side. But he is the most shoe-in player at 4.0, probably the only reliable player at 4.0 that is likely to play. So he's someone that you can put in as an enabler in your team and allow you to spend your budget wisely elsewhere. He's not going to get you a lot of points, but at your 5th defender, as your 5th defender, if he has to come in and play, it's good to know that there is someone that can play and theoretically can play his part in a clean sheet as well, even if he doesn't give you much else besides. The last player that I'm going to recommend is Lundstram. He's from Sheffield United. He's actually playing as a midfielder, and he's been really good in preseason. He's got 3 assists, and he's been talked off a lot as well. This has obviously led to a lot of people drafting him into their sides. But there's a caveat with him again, and that is that last season he was in the squad for Sheffield United in the Championship, but he didn't play a lot of games. And this year again, the quotes from the manager of Sheffield United were not so much that he will put him in the side and give him his chance this season. They were more along the lines of there could be more opportunities for Lundstram this season, which seems to indicate that he's not a shoe-in starter, but he might make a few appearances here and there, and he could come off the bench from time to time. So he's a good guy to have in your team, but between him and Kelly is the more shoe-in player. But I think these are probably the only 2 4.0 range players that are likely to get any pitch time within the first 10 games in the Fantasy Premier League, and that's as far as you should be looking right now. So these are the guys that you should look at as enablers. Lastly, just to cap off the video, you have certain players that you absolutely need to avoid like a plague. And two big ones that used to be big fantasy favorites and were last season as well. You've got Marcos Alonso at Chelsea, who is a premium defender who has in the past been one of the highest scoring defenders, but has lost his place to Emerson in the Chelsea side. And there's no guarantees how much pitch time he gets. And even if he does get it, the attacking threat that he used to carry has been largely blunted over the course of the last season, season and a half. So he's not likely to get you the kind of value that you want from a defender his range. Similarly, Benjamin Mendy, someone who, when he's on the pitch, looks like he could score or assist at any given point in time. But it appears as though he has a very bad track record with injuries. It looks as though City are going to start the season with Zinchenko playing in, with Angelino having also come in. It looks as though Pep Guardiola is preparing for the eventuality of having to do without Benjamin Mendy for a lot of games. And as a result of that, given the risk involved and the price of the player, he's someone you should probably stay away from until and unless you're absolutely sure that Pep Guardiola has put him in the side again. He's going to start every match. Once he does that, though, Benjamin Mendy is certainly someone I would advise on trying to bring back into your team. So that, guys, is a wrap. That's the defenders you should be looking at. Nobody else is really worth buying, but obviously it's the Fantasy Premier League, so I could be proved horribly wrong. And it's Pep Guardiola, so there is a chance Mendy's thrown into the side for the next game. So, you never know how things go. I hope you enjoyed this video. We're going to follow this up with a couple of videos about midfielders, attackers, and goalkeepers. And we're going to be bringing you more videos on the Fantasy Premier League every week, preferably covering players that you should pick up. And just a general tip, guys, going into the season, I'm going to throw one in after every video. One of the basic ones, one of the most fundamental rules is, as exciting as a player can be, and I'm looking at you, Nicolas Pepe, it's probably best to give some time to new recruits in the Premier League. So with that, I'm going to sign off. I hope you have a lovely day.